Okay, Professor Jim Schultz here for my Finance 680 students. As we talked about in class on Thursday night, special thank you to Allison Cobb for suggesting this. This is a really good idea. I wanted to go ahead and continue our discussion from class and kind of wrap things up here with just a very brief talk about the main points from World 3. I'm still going to expect you guys to kind of dig into the text and be able to really reconcile what's going on here kind of on your own. But I do want to spend, 5 or 6 minutes here to kind of nudge you in the right direction so you kind of know what you're looking for. And I actually, I do not have my textbook with me. It is in my office on campus. And so my original thought was we were gonna take a look at those two graphs that I suggested you guys take a look at. I believe they are figures 16.6 and 16.7, but we can't do that because I don't have my textbook with me. But nevertheless, kind of the general things I'm going to talk about, you can apply to those two graphs. And once we kind of go through this discussion, when you look at those two graphs, they should make a whole lot more sense. So let's go ahead and get started. So World 3. World 3 is the most realistic scenario. This is the scenario where you have both taxes and the threat of potential bankruptcy both in play now. And so in both worlds 1 and 2, we either had neither of those things or we were missing the bankruptcy component. But here in world number 3, we do indeed have both. So there are essentially two takeaways that I want you guys to get from this YouTube video to really help you in your independent study of this material. The first one is this term called financial distress. You're going to hear that term used a lot as you read through, these sections in your book. So what is financial distress? Well, financial distress is essentially just another word for bankruptcy. The idea here is, as the firm is searching for its optimal point of capital structure, it now has to deal with the possibility of financial distress. It now has to deal with the possibility of bankruptcy. And obviously, if you are a firm and you do indeed go bankrupt, there are going to be a plethora of costs that are associated with the bankruptcy proceedings. And so that potential financial distress has a cost associated with it. And so that's kind of how you want to view this whole financial distress piece. And so that brings us right down to the second part that I have here. And I'm going to email you guys this outline so that you can kind of take notes as you're listening to this video. The optimal point of capital structure. Okay, so what have we learned going through worlds 1 and 2, specifically world 2, because world 1, kind of was the least realistic scenario, and the conclusion from that world was that capital structure is irrelevant, but it was so far removed from reality that we kind of wanted to move very quickly into world number 2. So in world number 2, when taxes are introduced, as you guys learned, there is now this tax shield that becomes extremely valuable for the firm. And in other words, the levered firm is always going to be more valuable than the unlevered firm because of the present value of the tax shield. And the idea was, in World 2, the firm should just keep levering up because that would continually grow the value of that tax shield. And so it doesn't make sense for a firm to not lever up to the maximum possible point to capture as much as they possibly can from that tax shield. But as we saw in World 2, that's not a sustainable solution. It's not a feasible solution because you can't reach a point of 100% debt. It is literally not possible because then no one owns the firm and somebody has to own the firm. And so that brings us into World 3. World 3, this optimal point of capital structure, it essentially becomes a balancing act between the benefits from the tax shield relative to the cost of potential financial distress. And so if you look at those graphs now, right, like if you want to pause the video and kind of and crack that open, that would probably make a lot of sense. So when you have the graphs in front of you, you look at both of those graphs, right? The one graph has to do with firm value. The other graph has to do with cost of capital. But they're both basically sharing or showing the same message. And that message is this: moving from left to right on the x-axis. What are you doing as you move from left to right on the x-axis? You are increasing the amount of debt in your capital structure. So you are becoming more leveraged, right, as you move from left to right on the x-axis. Well, as you do that, what happens? At the beginning, when you do that at the beginning, your firm value expands because the present value of the tax shield is so valuable. When you move from like no debt to like 10% debt or 15% debt or 20% debt, the possibility of going bankrupt at that point from having too much debt is so low that the present value of the tax shield outweighs any costs of potential financial distress. But then you notice, if you look at that curve that's on the graph that shows firm value, or cost of capital, depending on which one you're looking at, you notice that at some point the firm value curve, it starts to flatten out, right? The slope starts to slow down on that curve, and the value increases start to decelerate, and so, or the cost of capital decreases start to also decelerate, depending on which graph you're looking at. And then if you notice, at some point, the firm value or the cost of capital curve actually changes direction. So in the case of the firm value, it peaks and then it starts to decrease if the firm tries to take on more debt. Or in regards to the cost of capital bottoms out and then it starts to increase if the firm takes on more debt. That is because if the firm takes on additional debt beyond that point of either the firm value peaking or the cost of capital troughing, the cost of potential bankruptcy or the cost of potential financial distress is now so great that it exceeds any additional gains from the present value of the tax shield. So, to wrap this whole thing up, and to basically summarize the last 2 minutes of what I said in one very simple line, or maybe two simple lines, bringing in what you guys have learned in your economics classes with like marginal revenue and marginal cost, or marginal benefit and marginal cost, right? What is the marginal benefit of something? It's the value increase that you receive from adding one more unit of something. What is the marginal cost of something? It's the increased cost that you have to absorb from adding one more unit of something, right? Well, taking that concept and applying it to this idea really synthesizes this whole concept very, very easily. And here it is. The optimal point of capital structure is where the marginal benefit of the tax shield equals the marginal cost of potential financial distress. That's it. That's all there is to it. And we're not talking about a specific level, like is it 40% debt or 60% debt or whatever, because that's going to be different for every firm. We're just talking about, I just want you guys to have a handle on, the characteristics that explain or that will, correspond with that optimal level of debt or that optimal point of capital structure. And it's going to be where the marginal benefit of the tax shield is equal to the marginal cost of potential financial distress. Because think about it, right? If the marginal benefit of the tax shield is greater than the marginal cost of financial distress, then you need to take on more debt because you're leaving something on the table, right? There's more value that you can extract. And so that's pretty much it. I actually went into more detail than I wanted to, or than I planned on doing it. But I'm feeling much better from Thursday night. So we are all systems go at this point. And yeah, so there you go. There's a little synopsis of what I want you guys to take away from World 3. And my hope is that you guys found this to be useful.